And one moment. Yeah. All right. So we are live.
Oh God.
On the Ultimate Life course, and I have Symone here, which is one of the travelers from Canada, and she is doing Erasmus here in Sweden as well. And I'm so grateful that you're here. And so she got an amazing, I find a fascinating story of her life, and how she handled it is quite inspiring to me. Inspiring in the sense of inspirare comes from breathing life into, meaning your story could breathe life into people and make them see that there is always hope, even if you are at a low point. And maybe you want to start out telling a little bit of your stories and who you are.
Oh goodness. Well, I think when I meet people and they tell me, like, they ask, what are you doing in Sweden, and you come from so far away, what brings you here, I always start with my move to France. So when I was 19, I decided that I was going to move to France just because I went to Paris for a week, and I don't know, I just fell in love, and I decided that that's where my new home was going to be. And so 8 months later, I planned an entire trip. Originally, I was supposed to do a 3-month backpacking trip with my cousin throughout Europe. I found out about something called au pairing, and 2 weeks before my flight, I scrapped all my plans, and I found a host family in the south of France, and I decided that I was going to live with them for a year. So yeah, I packed up my bags, moved to France, didn't really know what was going to happen, what was going to come to it. I think I went to France with the intention of being there for a year, hopefully learning the language, and then probably returning to Canada at the end of that. And what turned into a 10-month stay ended up being a 3-year residency, I guess.
Yeah.
Moved to France, loved it, fell in love with the people, the place, the language, and then I made a really, really, really close friend that her and I always joke that we're actually soulmates, as cheesy as that is. But we always, as soon as we met each other, we knew that we were supposed to travel together. And yeah, we started working on boats to get some money, the original plan being to buy a van and, again, travel Europe. And that plan also got scrapped, and we went to Asia instead. We did 2 months traveling through Thailand, Taiwan, Vietnam, Singapore. And I went with her to Australia for a few weeks, came back to France, and wanted to start my education. So I originally enrolled in a school in Paris. That plan also got scrapped, and I ended up in Sweden somehow.
You're good at scrapping plans and making something even more epic.
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah, you should see my journal. I have a journal when I planned 6 months of my entire life.
Yeah.
Down to the month. I had everything mapped out, and I was supposed to go to India and like do all these things, and yeah, all those plans were just tossed.
That's something actually really cool about you. One of the reasons that I wanted you on is because we went really deep into that phrase "temet noske," which means recognize or know thyself. And I feel like you have a deeper understanding than the general person that I meet on the street. And maybe it's connected also that you write every day or all the time journals and have like a bunch of them. And I would be also curious, when did you start writing journals, and why do you still do it? And yeah, and how do you write it? But let's go into those two first, all right?
I started writing my journal when I was 8. There was a series back in Canada. It was called the Dear Canada series, and
when you were what?
When I was 8 years old.
Shoot.
Yeah.
Wow.
Because I was reading the journals of little girls. It was really authors. They were fiction. But I was reading journals of little girls in and around my age, and they wrote about their experiences just wherever they were living in Canada at the time, whether it be in the 1800s or the 1900s or whatever. So I think that was where the inspiration came from, but I think more than that, it's really weird. It sounds really weird to say, but I always feel like I kind of became very conscious of myself. I don't want to say self-aware or woke or anything like that, but I was just aware of myself. Like I became more of a sentient being, I guess, at around that age. And I realized that there was so much, I think I had like a lot of strife and a lot of conflict when I was younger growing up. So it was a way for me, I think it was, to be honest, I think it was something of power in the way that like, so when I was younger, I had a lot of adults telling me how my life was being lived and what my experiences were. I was in and out of homes, whether it be with my mother or foster care or whatever. And so I always had adults telling me like, this is what this person did to you, and this is what this experience has done to you. And sometimes I'd remember it and sometimes I wouldn't. And so having a journal to kind of keep a chronologue of my own life gave me the power to be like, this is what's actually happening. These are the people that are important to me. This is how I was actually feeling at that time. And nobody can try to manipulate that or try to morph that into something that it wasn't. But I think it was just an accumulation of like many different factors. But yeah, I started when I was 8, and I wrote off and on until now. I'm 22 years old now. I still keep a journal. And I probably finish about 5 to 8 journals in a year. But I think now at this point it's just become habit. It's we have, I don't know, I like to do something with my hands, and it's a reassuring thing, and I like to document my thoughts on my life and my progression and my evolution as well. It's really amazing being able to go back to a year ago even and just see the way that I thought and the people that I was around and how they inspired or influenced me or affected me for better or for worse. So I love writing. I love documenting things. I keep photos and videos, but I'm not so good at that. So I think writing is kind of my niche.
Your power.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So it was really about documenting so you could always know what was actually happening in your life, and no one could tell you into like, no, it was this way, and then you were questioning yourself.
It's my narrative. Yeah, like my life is my narrative. So it was the only way that I could really solidify that idea, I guess.
I love that sentence, my life is my narrative. Is that an actual mindset of yours?
Oh, like, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. Like I think especially when I left when I was 19, I remember in the beginning when people would ask me like what I'm doing, what my story is, I would have nothing to tell them. And not that I'd have nothing to tell them, but I had nothing positive to share. I had nothing that was me to share. It was always my life experiences that were the product of somebody else's doing. So my entire, like, that's kind of how childhood is. You you have other people that are, for better or for worse, in control of your life. And so at 19, I was really in control. And I really didn't want to have the life that my family did, that they created for themselves. I didn't want that to be my story. When people would ask me what my story was, I wanted to be able to say, I traveled to these places and I met these people. And so yeah, for me, it's a really, I would say it's a core element to who I am, is to be the pilot of my own life, and because I had that control taken from me at a very young age. So that's really important to me. Yeah,
I love that. What do you feel like comes closest to a moment of decision where you said, okay, from now on, I'm the writer of my story, I'm taking charge of my life?
Oh, wow. I don't know if there was one clarifying moment.
Yeah.
I think it was a series and an evolution that developed over time. I think when I got to my mid to late teens, that's when my for lack of better words, like anarchist self kind of came out. I was like, fuck these. Can I swear?
Yeah, you can swear.
Okay, cool.
You can swear.
But that's when I was just like, fuck grown-ups and fuck the authority and fuck hierarchy and like, I don't need this and I'm taking everything into my own hands. Like, I moved out when I was 16 or 17, got an apartment with my best friend and went to school, went to work, and it was really in school, in high school, that I really, really, really developed that, like, I'm in control. Because I always viewed education is for me. What I learn is for myself. And, yeah, so I really developed that at a young age, but more so when I was a teenager. I'd go to school and I wouldn't go to my classes, and I was a straight A student. Okay. But I was just like, I don't want to spend my time in these classrooms being force-fed information. Like, I know that I can succeed in the class, and I don't need anybody else
to
but
sit
myself.
in there and just check off time.
Like, it just was bizarre to me to be 17 and be paying rent and having bills, but also having to ask to use the bathroom. And I was just like, for me, I was on the same level as everybody else, like as all the adults, which I think the adults really didn't like, having a 17-year-old that thought that they were the shit. But like, I was never disrespectful, but it was, I felt that space was for me. It was up to me to be invested in. Like, it was my responsibility. My education was my choice. Even though in Canada you have to legally go to school. But I think that's where it started, and I think it was just a snowball effect from there, maybe.
Interesting. I find it really... Okay, this shouldn't be on here, but I find it really cool that you were like, no, I'm not going to school, but I will still succeed in your little games of what I have to check off. Yeah. And that you saw yourself already then as this steer or the writer of your story. I had a moment where I felt like it's enough. Now I'm gonna take charge. Did you? It's okay if not. But did you feel like there was some moments where it was just too much control from the outside, or was it you were already living with 17 outside? So how? Yeah. When did you start living with for yourself and having to organize your own life?
Well, it kind of was actually at a very early age. Like I said, I was in and out of homes. My relationship with my mother wasn't, and still currently, like, is not the best.
Is there something I shouldn't go into?
No, I'm an open book.
All right.
But, you know, I was in and out of foster care, and I lived with my grandmother, I lived with my mom, so... And then when my sister was born, I was about 7 years old. My mother, so my father passed away before I was born, and the father of my sister passed away as well, a few years after she was born.
So we had of your stepsister.
Yeah, so half sister technically, but like they're my sisters.
Yes, I also have stepbrothers and sisters, and they're my
But when my sister was born, and because my mother didn't have the help of a father, or like a partner, and also she has her own issues that she had going on, I was raising my sister at a young age. So I was the one taking her to school. I was the one changing her diapers. I was the one at 3 a.m. You know, if she was crying, consoling her. Like, I was her sister, but her mother at the same time, and that continued for quite a while. Oh. And when I was 11 or 12, because of my mother's financial circumstance, we moved back in with my grandmother just so that my mom could, you know, find a better job to help provide, I guess. And that also didn't work out well. I think we stayed there for about a month because my mother and her mom just butt heads way too much. And she gave me the choice. She said, you can either come with me or you can stay here. And I think it was 11 or 12 when I made the decision. It was me. I made the decision to stay with my grandmother. Wow. And it was a really, really, really hard decision.
That's a powerful...
It was hard. It was really hard. And I think even to this day, I experience a little bit of guilt for it because my mother was quite abusive towards me, emotionally and physically. And, you know, I had this younger sister who was just going to be in that house by herself without me. And I still, to this day, I kind of feel like I should have stayed and I should have protected my sister. I should have been there. Even just to witness her grow up, because I haven't really been able to do that. But yeah, so at 12, like, that was a decision that I had to make and that I chose to make, and it was really, really hard. And I think that from a very, very young age, I was just expected to be more of an adult than I was meant to be. I was a kid. But I had to make certain decisions and follow a particular lifestyle that was just, it grew me. It grew me a lot. Really fast. And I don't regret it, because I like who I am now. Like, I like that I am. So if I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. Nobody else can tell me anything. Like, nobody can dissuade me or persuade me into something else. So I like that. But in the moment, it fucking sucked. But, yeah, I don't know. To be honest, I think it was with me from a very young age.
Yeah, I imagine that moment must be, like, so hard to make. How do you make such decisions? Like, if someone is at a point where they have to make a hard decision, how do you now, with all the decisions that you had to make, how do you make decisions now?
I feel like I have two very conflicting, very polarizing approaches to when I make a decision. Either I'm completely conflicted and I flip-flop back and forth for a very, very, very long time, or I'm very direct and I know exactly what I want. And I think the difference between the approach is the context. In the context that is where it's something that's non-consequential, that's when I flip-flop, because there's no consequence. But for me, when I made the decision to leave the house when I was 12 and live with my grandmother, it was survival. So it was a lot different. It was easier to make that decision in a sense, because I like, honestly, if I stayed living with my mother, I don't think I'd be alive today. Not in a very dramatic way. Don't want to whatever, but I cannot imagine myself being of sound mind to continue living if I were to live with my mom. So for me, it was really just a matter of survival. And in a way, like, when it's a question of surviving, you don't really have as much of a choice, I guess. It becomes very, very black and white.
All right. Yeah. Makes sense. There's so many things one can dive into, but I guess I've created this channel sort of to put myself into a space, and I want you to put yourself into a space where you imagine that you could talk to someone that would need your guidance, maybe somewhere around the world, and you could just stream your consciousness to them. And what would you express in that moment for someone maybe going through a rough time right now, or dealing with, like, I gotta survive this shit?
Yeah. I remember seeing a quote, and I feel like I'm going to misquote it.
No worries.
But I think it was something along the lines of, how you spend your days is how you spend your life. And that really resonated with me. Because I think a lot of times when people think about happiness, not to take it too far away from the topic at hand, but I think a lot of the times when people talk about happiness, they think that happiness is a destination. And like, humans, we're fickle, we're clumsy, we're messy, emotional beings. None of our emotions are ever consistent. They change all the time, within a day, within hours. Like,
we're all dogs.
So to disillusion yourself into believing that happiness is a destination is really false and really toxic. And I think that it's investing in present moment things that do make you happy. And I think that's the thing that can help you get through anything. Instead of thinking of you know, I'm depressed right now, I'm going to be happy in the future one day. It's doing little things today, because how you spend your days is how eventually you spend your life. Like if you think back 10 years ago and you try to remember what your life was kind of like, you kind of remember in an absorbed, rounded image instead of the details. And the more days that you were happy, the more positive that orb is going to appear in your memory. I think, at least for me. So I think for anybody, it's so fucking hard. It's so hard to be grateful and to be happy or try to induce happiness when you're just fucking miserable. I get it. I've been there. But it's literally the smallest things, and small things always build. Small sadness builds into depression, and small happiness builds into euphoria. Emotions work in the same way. So, I think it would be really just finding the thing in that day that makes you happy, or in that week if you can't do it in a day. Because eventually the collection of happy moments will make up your memory, I think.
Powerful. I think we shouldn't go too much longer, but let's go quickly into like global beliefs, meaning no worries. Meaning,
sorry, I'm thirsty.
Yeah, I got water all over. I'm always drinking while I'm doing the stream. But what is life for you all about?
I love these big questions.
I know.
You're expecting concise answers. I'm
no
22.
worries. No, what I'm expecting is that you just answer what comes to mind, and it doesn't have to be perfect.
Yeah. I don't know. For me personally.
For you personally.
For me personally, life is about experiences. I want every single experience, good or bad. Like, I want all of them. Like, this life is a one-time thing. There's no test run. Like, that's it. Like, you got, to quote Eminem, you've got one shot.
One shot, one opportunity.
But, no, but seriously, like, I just want to experience every single thing. Like, I think about, like, Hemingway and Darwin and the adventures that they had, and like that shit inspires me. Like, I don't want to just sit at home and do nothing. If you want to do that, that's cool. If that's what makes you happy, power to you. Like, mad respect. But for me, I want to see everything. I want to do everything, and making the first leap to go to France was terrifying, because I thought in my head, like, I grew up in a poor household, you know, in a broken household. So I always had like this narrative in my mind, like, these things, like, traveling isn't for you. You can't travel as a black person. You can't travel as a poor person. You can't travel as a prior foster kid. Like, that's not going to be for you. Those people don't do those things. And so when I first went to France, it really like destroyed that really negative narrative that I put on myself, which made every other thing that I want to do now so much easier. The world is so much more tangible. It's so much smaller in a beautiful sense. It's so much more connected to me personally. So now if I'm ever like, oh, I want to go to Zimbabwe, it doesn't feel like such a far-fetched idea anymore, because, you know, you just start chipping away at that thing that, like, I guess confronted you the most or challenged you the most. So now I look forward to being challenged so much, and I look forward to having those experiences so much, and it becomes a lot more realistic, just because I've already started to do those things.
I find it fascinating that one of the mottos or principles was like, I'm the writer of my own narrative, and at the same time you're really good, and something that transformed, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of your life is destroying your old narrative and expanding it.
Yeah. No, that's,
and I remember you talking at the kitchen table once about how an experience destroyed your worldview of what is possible as a black person. Do you want to share one of those experiences, maybe, either how you destroyed the narrative of being a black person or of being a foster kid?
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah, okay. Blackness. So I used to think that my identifying feature was the fact that I was black. I used to think that like when people first met me or when they first spoke to me, the first thing that they saw was my blackness. And not blackness as a neutral term, but blackness with a lot of connotations. And I don't think that's the case anymore. I think I moved away from that a lot. I've really come into being a black person. But I remember France really helped a lot because I saw a lot of beautiful black women that let their hair out naturally and they were praised for it. It wasn't just, oh, like, we accept you. It was, we are praising this. This is beautiful. Like, we love this. And it might seem very silly and superficial, but to feel attractive can be a really powerful thing when you never thought that you could be attractive before. And of course you shouldn't live your life based off of your looks and whatever, but it really helped me feel more comfortable within myself in that I wasn't just black, and even if people did see me as black, I was still beautiful. And not only that, but I had an experience in Vietnam in particular really, like, I guess, destroyed that old narrative, as we've been saying. So back in Canada, I was raised at least with the idea that the world kind of feared black people, that we were a target, that people wouldn't accept us, that we had to be extra careful when we travel to places because the world is a little less safe for us. And so when I went to Asia, I was really expecting a complete clash of culture, a complete, like, I thought people were going to stare at me and mock me and laugh at me, and I was really having a lot of mental talks with myself to prepare myself for explicit racism that I didn't really experience back in Canada, and I didn't really experience back in France. And the funniest thing is that I had the exact opposite. I remember being in Vietnam. I was in a place called Moine.
Good morning, Vietnam. Sorry.
But I was in a place called Moine, and they have, like, I think the shallowest river or something. And I'm walking through this river, and there's a bunch of school kids from just a local school playing in the river for lunch. And a lot of them, I could tell they were looking at me, and they would look at their friends, and they'd look down at their arm, and they'd look at my arm, and look back down at their arm again. And they just couldn't believe that, like, I had the coloration that I did. And they, like, some of them would, like, tentatively try to touch me. And at first I thought, like, if I knew that was going to happen to me while I was back in Canada, I would have been so offended. I would have been like, I'm a human too, blah, blah, blah. But that was human. It was so human. It was seeing these kids were just exploring something that they've never seen before. And they didn't do it with fear. They did it with genuine, beautiful curiosity. And so when I saw a kid, like, try to touch me, I directly went up to her and I put her hand on my arm and I let her touch my skin. And, like, they were just so happy to, like, share
and learn.
Yeah, and we couldn't speak each other's languages, but we were learning. You know, we were learning from each other. And there were women that would come up to me and touch my hair or try to take photos with me so they could show people from back home that they had met a black person. And it was never done in ignorance. It was never done with a malintent. It was always just such a beautiful moment of, like, celebration and sharing and learning and curiosity. It was really amazing. It was really amazing having that connection, because me being from a very diverse Canada, I could never imagine seeing somebody I'd never seen before.
Yeah.
And they did, but they did it with such grace.
Wow.
And it was honestly, it was beautiful. It was beautiful. It was really nice.
Wow, thank you. I already got so much out of this interview. It's about figuring out when you're at a low point, what is actually happiness for me, and then going, like, these small steps and taking charge of your own narrative by making, for one, those hard decisions, and the small decisions, they change over time.
Yeah.
And also then maximizing your orb of happiness throughout your life by maximizing your daily and weekly happiness in small increments. And sometimes doing what you fear, or going into different places to get a completely new perspective and destroy your old narrative. So that's super powerful. Would you be open to talk to the camera for a moment? And like, imagine you streaming. It's okay. Just like, imagine you had to stream spontaneously, which you kind of do. Just talking about what would you like to share if you had to give a small 1 minute speech about what you want to share about life. Really, and about your lessons, what you learned.
Do I have to do it to the camera?
You don't have to. It's just like, maybe if you want to impact them, or like, I want to connect with you. But no worries, you can also do it to me.
We've talked about this before.
Like, as to end the interview also.
We've talked about this before,
Yeah.
specifically, you and I. But I think one of the most underrated values in this world is empathy. I don't think we talk about it enough. I don't think we practice it enough. I don't think we embrace it enough. I think a lot of people are just, and it sounds so cliche, but it's true. I think a lot of people are very self-centric. And to a certain extent, that's okay. You're figuring out your own shit. Everybody's struggling with something. Everybody's suffering. But that's also the point of empathy, is realizing that everybody's suffering. And I think I would really, really wish that people just in their day-to-day interactions would just exemplify more kindness. Not niceness, kindness. And I think there's a difference between those two things.
What's the difference?
For me, niceness is like niceties and pleasantries and being polite. And kindness is a bit, for me at least, it's a bit deeper than that. It's about showing that you care, being an active listener, really hearing people, caring to understand people. Not just going off of a judgment or a frustration. I feel like I witness that a lot, where people get frustrated and they don't stop and pause to ask themselves why a situation is occurring, or why somebody's reacting in the way that they are. We're very reactionary humans. And I just wish that, just be fucking kind to one another. It's not hard. Like, just be nice. Not nice, kind. Fucking semantics, man. But,
True.
But yeah, that's the one thing that I think is really underrated in this world, and that I think radical kindness is a huge thing that I think we should try to seek out more.
All right. I think so too. And radical kindness, when you care about others, you start caring more about yourself, I feel, for me at least. And it actually can give you those small things of happiness to maximize your happiness,
absolutely.
or destroy your old narrative and create a new one. That is a great ending. Right?
Yeah.
Thank you for the interview.
Thank you.
Well then, explore, enjoy, share, and have a beautiful day. See you tomorrow.